Imagine climbing a rooftop where a promise from 10 years ago waits. But tonight, one friend arrives carrying freedom, while another carries debt. Stephen steps from his paid-off truck and studies the city below. Ryan ends a tense phone call and stares at unpaid obligations. The same skyline surrounds them, but their lives look nothing alike. 10 years earlier, they started adulthood from almost identical positions. One chased ownership and steady cash flow through countless small decisions. The other chased status, upgrades, and appearances that impressed everyone. Now the distance between them feels wider than the entire city. But what happened during those 10 years changes everything. The truth is, this story isn't about luck or income. It isn't about stock picks, trends, or chasing shortcuts. The real race began with choices nobody else could see. Every dollar spent became a vote for one future. Every dollar invested became a vote for another future. One friend bought things that demanded monthly payments forever. The other bought assets that quietly generated monthly cash flow. At first, their paths looked almost identical from the outside. But tiny decisions, repeated thousands of times, changed everything. To understand what happened, we must return 10 years earlier. Graduation morning arrived, carrying excitement, uncertainty, and endless possibilities ahead. Stephen crossed the stage, believing hard work would create success. Ryan crossed moments later, convinced success should immediately look impressive. Their families celebrated together, proud of how far both had come. Later, 2 job offer emails arrived within minutes of each other. The salaries were surprisingly close, separated by only a tiny gap. Neither realized income would matter far less than future decisions. That evening, they climbed their favorite rooftop overlooking downtown Dallas. Beneath city lights, they made a promise to meet again. 10 years later, they would compare where life had taken them. A few weeks later, their first paychecks finally landed. Both stared proudly at numbers representing years of effort. Ryan immediately imagined upgrades he believed successful adults deserved. Stephen wondered how much money could remain unspent each month. One paycheck became a shopping list before reaching Ryan's account. The other became a budgeting exercise before leaving Stephen's account. Ryan researched apartments, electronics, restaurants, and future vehicle payments. Stephen opened spreadsheets and tracked every dollar with patience. The difference seemed invisible, small, and completely unimportant. Yet these tiny habits quietly started shaping their future paths. Ryan scheduled apartment tours across the most expensive downtown buildings. Stephen searched practical apartments focused on affordability and shorter commitments. The luxury apartments felt impressive, modern, and filled with status. Stephen's smaller apartment felt simple but left room for savings. Ryan signed his lease, believing successful people should live visibly. Stephen signed quietly, wondering if he was falling behind. Months later, Ryan proudly invited friends to celebrate his upgrade. The apartment impressed everyone and reinforced Ryan's growing confidence. Meanwhile, Stephen reviewed his finances and noticed something unexpected. His monthly savings had quietly become large enough for something meaningful. His growing savings created a question neither had faced before. Ryan answered with a luxury vehicle he could barely afford. Stephen considered upgrading too, but paused after calculating costs. The monthly payment looked harmless until projected across several years. Ryan visited dealerships, convinced success should finally look successful. The salesman made ownership sound effortless and completely reasonable. Friends admired the vehicle immediately and praised Ryan's achievement. Stephen parked his aging used car nearby and felt embarrassed. For a moment, Ryan appeared ahead, while Stephen seemed stuck. Yet one hidden number would soon begin changing everything. Ryan's new payment quickly became normal and expected. Additional expenses quietly followed behind the vehicle every month. Insurance, maintenance, fuel, and upgrades expanded his lifestyle costs. Meanwhile, Stephen's savings continued growing beneath the surface. Nobody congratulated disciplined spending or increasing financial flexibility. Co-workers talked endlessly about Ryan's latest purchases and upgrades. The attention felt rewarding and encouraged even more spending. Stephen received no applause while building something far more valuable. His financial position strengthened quietly, without attracting any attention. Invisible wealth was growing, while visible wealth only looked impressive. The gap remained invisible, yet their financial paths kept separating. One routine customer visit introduced an unexpected conversation. Stephen arrived expecting business questions about work and income. Instead, the owner asked a completely different question. He asked what Stephen actually owned beyond his paycheck. The question felt simple, yet strangely difficult to answer. That evening, Stephen replayed the conversation repeatedly in silence. Most people tracked earnings while ignoring ownership entirely. A new perspective quietly began reshaping Stephen's future decisions. Before leaving, the businessman offered to reveal a life-changing lesson. The offer stayed in Stephen's mind until their scheduled lunch. Curiosity replaced hesitation as he arrived carrying questions. Mr. Howard avoided financial jargon and began telling simple stories. One story featured a worker constantly buying things that lost value. Another featured someone quietly purchasing things that produced income. The difference seemed obvious once explained through real examples. Stephen suddenly recognized a pattern inside his own financial life. Years of saving had created cash, but no productive ownership. The realization felt uncomfortable, yet strangely exciting at once. For the first time, Stephen saw a path beyond saving alone. Stephen left lunch carrying a completely different financial perspective. He stopped searching for upgrades and started searching for ownership. After weeks of research, a small opportunity finally appeared. A local business owner wanted to sell an aging vending machine. The machine looked unimpressive and generated very little monthly income. Most people ignored it because the earnings seemed insignificant. Stephen saw something different hiding behind those tiny numbers. Ryan laughed when he heard what Stephen planned to purchase. While others chased appearances, Stephen completed the deal quietly. The first few dollars arrived, proving ownership worked differently. Stephen checked the vending report before work and noticed new sales. The earnings were tiny, yet something felt completely different this morning. For the first time, money arrived without trading hours for dollars. He stared at the numbers longer than any paycheck before. The machine earned overnight while he was sleeping peacefully at home. A simple realization began reshaping everything he believed about wealth. He calculated how multiple machines could multiply that same process. Suddenly, his savings looked less like security and more opportunity. The question stopped being how much he could save yearly. The question became how many income-producing assets he could eventually own. Every vending machine dollar returned directly into buying another asset. The profits remained small, making progress feel frustratingly slow sometimes. Most people would have spent the extra money on themselves. Instead, Stephen treated every dollar like another future employee. Months passed before the second machine finally joined the first. Ryan celebrated another raise by upgrading parts of his lifestyle. The gap between their visible lives continued growing wider. One collected possessions, while the other collected cash-producing assets. Mr. Howard reviewed the numbers and quietly nodded approvingly. Stephen realized patience was becoming a financial advantage few possessed. Years of disciplined reinvestment finally created a much larger opportunity. A small duplex appeared on the market at an intriguing price. The required down payment would consume most of Stephen's savings. Excitement arrived immediately, followed closely by fear and uncertainty. He spent evenings studying expenses, rents, repairs, and vacancy risks. Every number seemed capable of changing his future dramatically. Ryan thought risking savings on property sounded completely unnecessary. The analysis continued for weeks before Stephen reached confidence. A bank officer reviewed his finances and approved financing options. Standing outside the duplex, Stephen knew another decision was approaching. The duplex purchase finally closed, and responsibility arrived faster than expected. Late one evening, a tenant called about a leaking kitchen pipe. Stephen drove across town after work, carrying tools and frustration. The repair cost more than the month's expected rental profit. For the first time, ownership felt heavier than freedom. Another weekend disappeared while handling paperwork, maintenance, and inspections. Meanwhile, Ryan pointed at the stress and questioned the entire strategy. From the outside, Stephen seemed busier, poorer, and less successful. Yet each solved problem strengthened systems that would outlive his job. Standing alone after another repair, Stephen wondered if persistence would pay off. The difficult years suddenly began revealing results hidden beneath the surface. Monthly reports showed vending machines and rentals producing meaningful combined cash flow. For the first time, asset income covered part of Stephen's expenses. His paycheck still mattered, but dependence on it started shrinking. Every machine and tenant payment felt like another employee working tirelessly. The fear that once surrounded ownership slowly transformed into confidence. At a community event, someone noticed the patience behind Stephen's progress. Sarah listened carefully while others discussed salaries, promotions, and purchases. Their conversation centered around freedom, ownership, and future possibilities instead. Driving home afterward, Stephen realized his paycheck was losing control. A larger paycheck arrived, but old habits quietly expanded alongside it. Ryan celebrated the promotion before seeing where the new money vanished. The luxury apartment suddenly felt too ordinary for his status. A newer vehicle upgrade seemed justified after such a major raise. Vacation plans grew bigger, faster, and more expensive than before. Every bonus dollar received already had a spending destination waiting. Meanwhile, asset income kept arriving, whether work felt productive or not. Monthly expenses climbed so quickly they chased every income increase. Ryan looked wealthier than ever, while feeling strangely unchanged financially. Two futures continued separating, though neither could fully see it yet. Stephen and Sarah celebrated simply, choosing partnership over expensive displays. Their wedding budget stayed modest, leaving capital available for future investments. While others upgraded lifestyles, they discussed cash flow during dinners. Every month, another asset joined their growing portfolio of income sources. Sarah tracked expenses carefully, helping opportunities stand out more clearly. Rental income and vending profits slowly covered larger portions of expenses. Friends questioned why they still lived far below their means. The couple focused on ownership percentages instead of status symbols. Years of discipline started producing results impossible for outsiders to see. Together, they realized wealth was becoming a system, not a paycheck. Economic news turned negative, and uncertainty spread across the city. Ryan immediately calculated bills, loans, and obligations tied to income. Every payment suddenly felt heavier as future earnings seemed less certain. Stephen felt concerned too, but his assets continued producing cash flow. The vending machines kept operating quietly despite growing economic worries. Rental income arrived again, helping cover expenses during uncertain months. Ryan reviewed his finances and noticed almost nothing was truly owned. Stephen watched income sources work independently, reducing pressure each month. The difference between looking wealthy and being wealthy became visible. Then, Ryan opened a financial statement that changed everything. Ryan stared at numbers he had avoided calculating for many years. A decade of promotions had produced income far beyond expectations, yet liabilities still outweighed assets by an uncomfortable margin. Car loans, lifestyle upgrades, and recurring payments filled the statement. For the first time, total earnings and actual wealth appeared separately. The gap between the two numbers felt impossible to ignore. Ryan retraced years of spending decisions, searching for explanations. Every upgrade once felt harmless when viewed individually. Together, they formed a financial mountain that refused to disappear. Silence filled the room as reality finally became undeniable. Asset income reports started looking surprisingly similar to monthly paychecks. Years of small decisions were finally stacking into meaningful results. The vending machines now produced income from multiple busy locations. Rental properties continued collecting cash flow even during difficult months. For the first time, employment income no longer stood completely alone. Stephen reviewed the numbers repeatedly, searching for mistakes that never appeared. Sarah smiled as another month closed stronger than the last. The couple realized their assets were carrying increasing financial responsibility. What once seemed impossible now felt mathematically inevitable and predictable. A new question emerged. What happens when assets exceed expenses entirely? The numbers no longer argued. They quietly revealed two different paths. Ryan arrived carrying obligations that demanded attention every month. Stephen arrived, backed by income streams, still working without supervision. The city looked unchanged, yet both men felt entirely different. Ryan remembered chasing raises, upgrades, and approval from everyone around. Stephen remembered sacrificing comforts while purchasing assets few people noticed. Neither journey felt easy, but their destinations now stood visible. One depended heavily on tomorrow's paycheck arriving exactly on schedule. The other could withstand interruptions because ownership continued producing income. As sunset covered the skyline, the rooftop promise finally made sense. Lifestyle inflation never controlled his decisions after income started growing. Instead, each raise strengthened savings and accelerated future ownership opportunities. Early sacrifices created capital that later purchased productive financial assets. The first vending machine looked insignificant, but changed everything permanently. That tiny machine taught ownership better than years of employment. Every dollar earned flowed back into additional income-producing opportunities. Small cash streams slowly combined into something much larger over time. Progress appeared invisible monthly, yet became obvious across entire years. The strategy required patience, discipline, and resistance against social pressure. Eventually, the system began producing meaningful income without constant effort. The machine kept growing because profits were recycled, not consumed. Small cash flows became larger streams through years of disciplined reinvestment. Each vending machine purchased another piece of future financial freedom. Rental income added a second engine, pushing wealth forward steadily. Ownership multiplied, while expenses stayed controlled and carefully managed. The gap between appearance and reality widened every passing year. Many people chased income while ignoring the assets producing it. Wealth grew quietly because attention stayed focused on cash flow. Financial independence arrived gradually, then suddenly seemed completely obvious. The lesson became impossible to ignore once the numbers spoke.